Welcome to the HAYVN Hubcast, a place to learn what business leaders, owners, and professionals are doing to navigate and grow in today's market. Hear from industry experts on everything from marketing, leadership, financing, and more. Brought to you by HAYVN, a co-working space where you can connect, create, and get stuff done.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the HAYVN Hubcast. I'm Nancy Sheed, your host, and I am here today speaking with Ed Knight of Transference. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you for having me.
Ed is the, we were just talking, founder, CEO, head of Transference, and it's a company that helps people at an interesting stage of their life. Ed, can you sort of talk about what Transference is and who it serves before we get into how you got there?
Yeah, Transference basically was a company founded on this concept. Transference resolves administrative red tape issues for certain groups of people. These groups include newly appointed executors of an estate. This is my experience that when people have this responsibility thrown on them, they are very overwhelmed with a lot of paperwork and red tape. Transference will either take that over or guide those executors through those steps. Also, Transference works with individuals handling the affairs of a deceased loved one. Even though their executors are handling the estate, still the surviving spouses, the family members have to go through a lot of stuff to kind of remove the deceased name off of paperwork, utility bills, loans, and so forth. And lastly, Transference works with powers of attorney who are caring for aging parents or family members. There's a time where that power of attorney has to make a decision of where to put that family member, sometimes in an elderly home, and there's a ton of paperwork associated with doing that, and Transference will tackle that for them also.
What a gift. This is a relatively new business for you. Can you talk a little bit about your background and what brought you into realizing this was a business and a need in the marketplace?
Yeah, definitely. I used to be a financial advisor myself. I have my Series 7, 65, my insurance licenses way back from 2008. I transitioned at one point over to the Fidelity Investments financial firm, and I worked there for about over a decade. And in the process of working there, I did notice that a lot of family members or surviving spouses would come to our Fidelity office with literally a folder full of statements, and they would kind of give them to us at the Fidelity office and basically say, what am I supposed to do with this? And when we kind of inquired a little further, we would open up the folder and it was the deceased husband, for example, statements with all the deceased husband's name on it from all different brokerage firms and financial firms. And, we would pull out the Fidelity statements and explain, we're going to handle these for you, but you have to call these other institutions and get this resolved. And there was always a lot of stress after I said something like that. How do I do this? Do I need to call an attorney? Where do I begin? What are the steps? And, we couldn't really help them for the other companies. So in that moment, I kind of recognized, I said, there's a need here for a certain group of people. And I say it's a certain group because some people do have this very organized. There's a time where they prepare for this, and that group is not necessarily going to use Transference, but there is a group that doesn't prepare for this. And when life really comes crashing down and that life event of a loved one passing happens, that I'll call them the unorganized group gets extremely overwhelmed. And that's where Transference comes in and really helps them out from an administrative standpoint.
What a gift. You've kind of identified who the people are and where they're coming. And as you said, some people want to talk about it and be organized. Some people don't. Sometimes it happens unexpectedly. When somebody's in that situation, you think, it should be clear there's a will, or there's somebody who's been designated as the person who's in charge, or my loved one gets everything. It should be straightforward. It's never that way in this day and age of forms and documents and ID and proof and verification. And I would assume now also like digital records and those sort of things.
Yeah.
Aside from not talking about it, which we'll get to, what are the biggest sort of either mistakes or what are the easiest things people could do to make this part of their life easier, or to make this less, even if they worked with you with Transference, what are some of the things that could make their lives easier and not experience this overwhelm?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to being organized. I actually am associated with another group. It's called NAPIO. They're a National Association of Professional Organizers. I'm affiliated with them also. So if people are able to prepare to kind of figure out where things are before the life event of someone passing away, that is going to benefit them. I kind of break it down to this kind of one statement. And I say, at a minimum, sit down with your family member, spouse, partner, get a blank piece of paper, title it your name, and say, these are all my accounts. These are my account numbers. These are my passwords. This is where everything is located. Make the list as detailed as possible to cover every aspect. God forbid you should disappear tomorrow, that your surviving spouse will know. And put that piece of paper with the will. And if you don't have a will, get one. And, so at a minimum, that's how you could prepare for that. One thing I like to add, I should have brought it in on my other, when I was talking about this before, is that attorneys can help you through this process. They do the exact same thing that I do. Exactly. They will walk you through the process, do all the administrative work, handle everything that I'm talking about, except the attorneys will charge you their $400 to $500 to $600 an hour rate. Transference is on average about $150 an hour.
So true. And as we were speaking earlier, as somebody who's gone through this process, you don't know where to turn. You don't know who does what. And sometimes I'm curious how sometimes there's actually sort of, I shouldn't say competing parties, but all the parties' interests aren't always aligned, be it the family member, the executor, or the power of attorney. Sometimes there are three different people, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so trying to understand whose responsibility is what, how it's handled, I'm sure is different in every situation. But to me, it was clear as mud. And I wish I'd known a lot of other things beforehand. When you were talking about that blank piece of paper, are there things you advise people, like a good executor or the appropriate person for, are there some skill sets aside from being organized that, your loved one is your loved one, but are there other skill sets or things besides being organized that you want people to think about when they're either taking this responsibility on or when they're going through this?
Communication is a skill that needs to happen. You need to sort of be very open to how you want to handle your situation after you pass away. The more details that you give your surviving family members about your situation is going to be such a relief to them. God forbid you should pass away, because as soon as you're gone, they are on their own. And if whatever sort of information or communication you can do now is going to be such a benefit to them after the fact. And how many times I've sat in front of surviving spouses where they just have a stress of their face is just stressed out because they just don't know where stuff is. And that is one of the biggest steps, is that you got to find everything first. And then once you find it, then you got to tackle the red tape paperwork of removing the deceased name off of the account, sending in the death certificates. So I guess, whatever you can do to ease that process beforehand is going to be such a relief to the surviving family members after the fact. But transference, even if the person was unorganized and nothing is found, we'll still be able to go in there and kind of iron everything out for you anyway.
I love that. You mentioned finding it. I've heard of the situation or may have experienced it where finding it and then proving that it actually belongs in the estate to begin with, because, so we've had that experience. It's like, I think this belongs in the estate, but we don't have any records of it. And so how do you go and prove that? In addition to the sort of finding it and tracking it and then what you deal with it, how, Ed, do people then move on? Do you work collaboratively with an attorney? Does somebody come along and say, or do you kind of help set the tone of, this is what I can do, as you said, and let your attorney do this? Do you help set the tone for them and clarify who's doing what? Because I would think that would be a huge gift.
Yeah. I kind of clarify and I explain, if they're coming to me first, that, I explain that this is an administrative service. We're going to handle everything from a paperwork standpoint. I said, if we're going to hit some legal hiccups or some bumps, you need to speak to your attorney. So as we're going through the process and the steps and so forth, and if they have everything somewhat organized in the sense that the beneficiaries are lined up correctly and they had transfers on death lined up correctly, my job with the client is relatively smooth. But if things start getting a little legal, I will stop in my tracks and say, please speak to your attorney now. And also from a financial standpoint, when all the money does move, and sometimes the clients are looking for financial advice of like, all right, now I'm inheriting $100,000. Well, how should I invest this, Ed? I'm like, no. You need to speak to your financial advisor about that. So we're going to get that $100,000 out of the deceased's individual account and put it into your name. But after that, you need to speak with the professionals going forward.
But I just love that you're like, you could at least point in the right direction of this is who does what. You know what I mean? Like, as opposed to feeling completely stranded in a situation where you're like, I have no idea what I need to do. I have no idea if it's being done right. And I have no idea where I go next. What a gift your service is to sort of set the tone and be able to point people in those directions and then do some of the heavy lifting that they don't even realize they need to do.
Yeah, real life example, real life client, surviving wife calls, client of mine. She's the power of attorney over her husband who is in hospice as we speak. And she's the power of attorney. Now, one thing about powers of attorney, they exist as long as the person that a power of attorney of is alive. As soon as they pass away, the power of attorney disappears and everything gets a little more complicated after that. So she called me in time, still power of attorney, husband is dying, which is unfortunate. But she said, I don't know if I have everything organized correctly. So we went over all the statements, checked out all the beneficiaries, and there were a lot of gaps, a lot of incorrect stuff. So we smoothed over everything, aligned up the beneficiaries, added her as a joint account owner, did everything we could, kind of pedal to the metal considering the husband was in hospice. He passed away 3 weeks later. We were done. And then when he passed away, everything just went smooth and transferred accordingly. She avoided probate headaches, was more than thankful, and everything worked out fine. But she proactively did it. It was something that she stayed on top of and we worked through, and it worked out perfectly for her.
I love that you don't have to wait for the life event to have passed, but to even be proactive in thinking about it is, can also solve a lot of problems, which a lot of people don't necessarily know. To your point, getting the clue that you're going into hospice. Let's just dive into that for a minute. You probably have your business because people don't want to talk about this. They don't want to think about it. They don't think it's going to happen to them, or they do think everything is fine. Are there conversations that loved ones could be having with each other to sort of crack the ice on this one? And again, I say it from, I'm going to be very vulnerable. Somebody who was in hospice, who was still telling us he wasn't going to die, right?
Yeah.
So are you learning things? Are you finding ways to sort of crack into this conversation besides the success story you've just told us about being proactive? Is it becoming an easier conversation to have, or it is what it is and we're human beings? Yeah,
the thing that I'm sort of tackling now, a little bit of a hurdle, is that this service is brand new. No one knows it exists technically. Like we said before, when people find themselves in a situation like this, they default to their attorney. They don't know that they have another option. So as of right now, I've been sort of on the marketing campaign through networking groups, doing a lot of seminars at elderly care communities, at senior centers, working with the elderly care group, which is an enormous group of people, to kind of get my message out. And they understand it too. I'm working closely with an elderly care advocate who actually goes into the homes when the caregiver is at the breaking point of they can't take care of, for example, the father anymore. They just can't do it. They're at the home. The father needs more care. So my partner in there will go to that home and sort of say, hey, this is what we do next to get your father out of the home, get him into the right facility. But the partner I work with, his name is Ryan, basically asks the same question to every time. Who's got power of attorney? Who's dealing with the financials? How are things lined up? And unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, people don't know these answers. So he's having me go in there right when that moment is happening to kind of get them organized and saying, hey, let's get everything lined up correctly. So when Ryan comes over, we got everything sort of on a spreadsheet here for him. We know where all the accounts are. We know where everything is, and we can move forward with that. So working with people like Ryan, doing the seminars, working at the networking groups has been beneficial. And, it's a slow momentum, but it's, heading in the right direction.
I appreciate just sort of asking some of those questions at the critical points prior to the life event, as it were. Ed, I'm very curious. you mentioned people coming, the surviving spouse coming in, or the surviving person with the power of attorney coming in with a file of paperwork. Technology has changed. They don't want us to have they don't want us to have paper. Everybody wants us to have paperless statements. Everything's on the computer. How has technology either A, made your job or this situation easier, or has it made it harder? I'm just curious, is it easier to do things remotely because you don't have to physically walk in a bank, or what is technology doing in this kind of situation?
Yeah, technology, I think, makes things a lot easier personally. That doesn't always work out for the elderly client who's not very tech savvy.
Right.
For my background, thankfully, I in the early 2000s, I used to work for an IT company. So I used to work at a help desk. So I'm very comfortable with the way that technology works, even today, even though it's been a while. But when I'm working with clients, and we do a lot of what I call conference calls with the institutions, because a lot of times, not to stereotype the elderly group, but a lot of them are not as savvy as some of the younger people when it comes to technology. So they need their hand held. But it's an easy call. It's an easy call as long as we have, social security numbers, birthdays, days of death, addresses, stuff that verifies who they are. And we'll call a company together saying, hey, we need to reset the password, or we forgot the username. And as long as they get verified and we have the correct information, it's a pretty easy process. And then we just keep record of what we have, log into the situation, print out what we need, or view what we have on screen. That really gets the ball rolling.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that it hasn't been while it's a blessing, it hasn't been a complete hindrance for people, in this day and age with, you don't have any proof of that there was an account here, or you don't have the files and records that we all used to keep so steadily. Ed, you've mentioned several things about networking and kind of referrals and partners in terms of that. We obviously met through HAYVN. I'd love to hear what brought you to HAYVN and what's HAYVN contributed to sort of your growth as you're building your business, and what are the aspects of HAYVN you've enjoyed and you've been able to contribute to?
Yeah, HAYVN is a very interesting little story because I never anticipated being in the Darien, Southern Connecticut market. I'm in New Haven County, but I have an associate who's part of Fairfield. He works in the elderly care group. He said, he called me up. He's like, hey, you got to go to this networking event. It's down in Darien. And I said, Neil, I'm not sure if Darien is quite my clientele. It's a very affluent community down there. They usually have things pretty lined up. And when it comes to someone passing away, he's like, come and go, just come and see what they have to say. And so I kind of went on an opening invitation. And then I realized that a lot of the people there, small business owners, collaborating with them, talking with them, just, interacting with them, we're all doing the same thing. And it's just such a great way to network, great feedback. I've sat down with, many of the entrepreneurs there on a one-to-one basis just to kind of pick their brain. They were picking my brain. And we weren't always doing the same thing, but it's just such a positive networking environment. Felicia, the founder, really has a really good vibe with the place. It's relaxing. There's no stress. It's very, very open. And I think any small business owner from this Connecticut area, if you're within a 20-mile radius, should really consider joining, in my opinion.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. The HAYVN community is a very special place. And I think it might be sitting in Darien, but it's not Darien specific, right? Like I think the Southern Fairfield County and the small business owners. And I think also if one has come from corporate, I think you're in this small business development mode. It's really, really helpful to see that there are others going through what you're going through, or they've been there before you, or, as you said, you've talked about referral partners and people who are in similar spaces. So we are excited that Transference is part of the HAYVN community. Ed, thanks for your time and for kind of enlightening us and our listeners with this area of life that you said is where people need a lot of help and they don't know they need the help until they get there. So it's a gift that you are providing it. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate you doing this for me.
We will be back with another episode of the HAYVN Hubcast. If you like what you hear, please give us a review, share it with friends, and make sure to subscribe.
Thanks for listening to the HAYVN Hubcast, a place to learn what business leaders and owners are doing to navigate and grow in today's market. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. HAYVN is a co-working space and virtual community located in the heart of Fairfield County, Connecticut. HAYVN is a hub for business owners and professionals to connect, create, and get stuff done. Find out more about the HAYVN community online at hayvn.com. That's HAYVN.com. HAYVN Hubcast is produced by Sound Advice Strategies.